Welcome back to Bonkers For Boro, and I'm joined by the ultimate man in the know, and that is Craig Johns from Teesside Live. And we're here to talk about the big news coming from the Riverside Stadium, and that is that Rob Edwards has been confirmed as the new head coach of Middlesbrough. First of all, Craig, how are you doing? How's this week been for you?
Yeah, not too bad. I had a week off, a timely holiday planned, so I missed most of the kind of waiting around and whatnot. Got back to work yesterday, Thursday, so yeah, just in the nick of time, really.
Absolutely. So Rob Edwards is in. He's going to be the new head coach of Middlesbrough. So what's your initial reaction to that news, Craig?
Yeah, I think ultimately the feeling from me is that it's kind of a wise appointment. It's one that I appreciate doesn't necessarily excite fans. I think the mood music that I'm sensing right now among supporters is it's not probably the most exciting name in the world, and I do understand that. Obviously, how it ended for him at Luton isn't the greatest kind of way to come into the Borough job, but I think to remember that Rob Edwards, took over Luton at a similar time that Michael Carrick took over at Borough. He actually interviewed for the Borough job at the time Carrick got it, and he was said to have really impressed at that point. He didn't get it then, but he went to Luton and ultimately got them up ahead of Borough. He also had a promotion on his CV at Forest Green. He has a record of working with young kids from his time at Wolves, and then also the FA, so that kind of player development side that Borough like. I've been reading a lot about what former players have said about him, and his approach in terms of arm around the shoulder kind of thing isn't too too dissimilar to the way Michael Carrick was, which I don't think is a bad thing in terms of his mannerisms, and the way he deals with players. And then obviously he already has that relationship with the recruitment team as well. Kieran Scott and Chris Jones both work with Rob at Wolves, so I think that's a key point as well, because obviously Middlesbrough operate in this model like so many other clubs do now, where ultimately you need your coaching team and your recruitment team aligned. That's how you ensure you get the best players, and are all going in the same direction, if you like. So yeah, other than the excitement factor, which I appreciate he maybe doesn't tick right now, he does tick a lot of the boxes that Borough were ultimately looking for this summer.
Absolutely. So a lot was made of the interview process. So obviously, fans may remember that the season ended. Middlesbrough went almost like straight into this review that they were wanting to do of what was going on, and that was based around Michael Carrick. It was the coaching team, it was the recruitment team, it was the medical team. It was a whole sort of thing. It wasn't just about Michael Carrick. That review took place. The decision was made to part company with Carrick himself. And then the interviews got started, and we're led to believe that there was a lot of interviews taking place over the space of a week or two. There's been a little bit of speculation online that there wasn't actually any interviews, sort of fan theories and that sort of thing. But Craig, what can you tell us about the interviews and the candidates for the job, and how that sort of played out over the last couple of weeks?
Yes, obviously, from what we were told, there was many applicants. As always happens in these cases, the club go in with maybe a couple of names who they'd be interested in. So Steve Cooper was on that list, and obviously Rob Edwards as well. He fit the bill. He almost got the job last time and was out of work, so that made sense. Borough will sound out candidates like that, but of course they invited other candidates to put themselves forward, and from what I was told early on in the process is that they didn't feel the need to rush. The players are not back for pre-season until next week, and they're already well down the line with recruitment planning and things like that. So they wanted to really go at this kind of process and consider every available option. So from what we were told of the many applicants that they got, there were two in particular from Europe who kind of stood out and were added to their list to then go forward into interviews. And I think it emerged last week. I saw while I was away on holiday that one European candidate, so sadly, of course, no names were ever given, but one European candidate particularly impressed and got quite close to coming down to it in conversations and things like that. And as I mentioned Steve Cooper, and very early on, the noises from his camp were that he wouldn't really be interested. Borough felt like they wanted to have that conversation still and felt they could maybe convince him, but having managed his last two jobs being in the Premier League and looking unlikely at the minute to get another Premier League job, the noise was that Cooper wanted to go to Europe, and he likes the idea of that experience as his next one. So from what we're led to believe, conversations with Cooper happened, but I was never really convinced that he was interested. So it ultimately come down to, from what we're told, Rob Edwards impressed yet again in the interview. He has that Championship promotion experience, but and then in general, knowledge of the division and what it takes to get out of it. But I think what particularly impressed was the fact that he showed really good knowledge of the squad currently. So the feeling is, alongside that relationship that he already has with Kieran Scott and the recruitment team, the feeling was that his knowledge of the Borough squad being so strong as it already is means he can, get in and get his feet under the table very quickly, and is kind of transition into the new role should be, the hope, quite a seamless one.
Absolutely, and Danny Rohl was one of the other names that was heavily linked with the job. There was talk of him he was one of the three leading candidates for the position as well. But obviously, there's been a huge amount going on at Hillsborough, which we won't go into in all of its detail. But with failure to make payments of wages to players and staff members, and Danny Rohl's uncertainty over his job. So how close did he come, I guess, to being successful, or what sort of part did he play in the process over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so the other answer to that is that I honestly don't know. There was never a case where any names were ever put to me in terms of this is who we're interviewing. The club would always want to kind of keep that kind of thing under wraps. I think it was clear that Danny Rohl would have wanted the job. He clearly wants out of Sheffield Wednesday, and you can understand why. And he's been linked to just about every job that's become available this summer. And I think I would imagine that the fact that Sheffield Wednesday have such a high release clause in his contract has put most off, because Southampton made approaches for him during last season and then went with Will Still on this occasion. So I could only assume that Sheffield Wednesday's high asking prices put a lot of people off, because I think Danny Rohl's shown a lot of promise at Sheffield Wednesday and proven himself to be a very good coach. But in terms of Borough's job, I honestly don't know whether he was interviewed or not. His name was heavily linked with it, but I think that was inevitable because his name's been heavily linked with every available job. But whether or not he did speak to Borough, I honestly don't know.
No problem. And so with regards to Rob Edwards, then, so as you said, there was a lot of competition for this position. There was him, and there was Steve Cooper, potentially Danny Rohl. There was two candidates from Europe, and they're just the ones that people know about. They're just the ones that have sort of made it out into the press. So from your point of view, Craig, what do you think it was about Rob Edwards that particularly impressed? What do you think it was that won over the Middlesbrough hierarchy and ultimately convinced them that he was the right man to succeed Michael Carrick?
Yes, I think right from the start, he was always going to be an obvious candidate for the job. As we said, he impressed last time and came close to getting the job when Michael Carrick did. He has that, previous relationship with Kieran Scott and Chris Jones, the head of recruitment, which straight away helps on that side of things, which obviously right now is so important to Borough. He has that history of player development, particularly among youth players from his time with Wolves and then the FA. Obviously, that's a big part of Borough's strategy now, is trying to develop players and, potentially making profit from selling players, given, the financial realities of the Championship these days. And, and ultimately, he knows the Championship. He's worked in the Championship. He got Luton unexpectedly out of the Championship. And then I think, to be fair to him, of the last 6 teams that have gone up to the Premier League from the Championship, Luton were the one who put up the best fight of any of them and won the most points. And they were quite unlucky in the end, I thought. And obviously, I know when they come back down last season, it didn't go so well, and he was sacked in the January. But nevertheless, what he achieved previously at Luton, shouldn't be out the window, because that was, promotion against the odds, if you like, which is I know Borough are always highly favoured in the bookies odds, but effectively they're always competing against at least 3 clubs with parachute payments, which gives them a £50 million advantage at the start of every season. So you're looking for other advantages that you can take, and Rob Edwards has already proven you can get that little extra bit out of players. He can find those advantages, and I think ultimately, whatever ideas he put forward within the interview, which, as I say, he was able to do that, I guess, convincingly because of his knowledge of the squad that exists, has ultimately convinced Borough this time that he is the right man.
So under Michael Carrick, fans were quite aware of how the team was going to set up. He kind of had a plan A, which was based around getting on the ball. And when it worked really well. If it didn't work, it didn't really work at all. So with Rob Edwards, we're led to believe that he's got a few different sort of tactical styles. He's got a few tricks up his sleeve. So from your point of view, Craig, how do you see him setting up with Middlesbrough?
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the kind of interesting aspects or things to learn over the course of the summer, really, with him. I think, as we've said, he showed a good knowledge of Borough's squad in the interview process. So I would imagine he already has something in mind, though he'll probably want to, take a closer look at things during pre-season training. And obviously, starting in the job when he does gives him that advantage of having plenty of time on the training pitches to implement whatever style he wants to implement, and also potentially sign players who might fit into that and give Borough the extra bit that they'll maybe need to play whatever way he wants. I think, obviously at Luton, a lot's been made of the way he played at Luton, but to be fair to him, he's always said about Luton is that he went in, he recognised there was particular types of players at Luton. He recognised what their strength was, and he played that way. So, maybe they were a bit more direct than what Borough traditionally would be. But, Borough don't have a Carlton Morris and an Elijah Adebayo, up top. So he went in and played that way because he had those strengths and he used them to his advantage. And clearly it worked because they went on a brilliant run and won promotion to the Premier League. And then, as we say, even in the Premier League, made as good a fist as many have in recent years at trying to stay there as well. But, I think he'll recognise that coming to Borough, that isn't necessarily a strength of Borough's. They don't have physicality up top. They have some technically good attacking players, the likes of Finn Azaz and Morgan Whittaker. They have a really hard-working striker and a good finisher in Tommy Conway, but not necessarily a striker you'd say is a back-to-goal kind of striker, although, Josh Coburn could get an opportunity this summer. That's obviously an interesting aspect of this summer as he returns from Millwall and seeing what happens with him. But ultimately, I think I would expect... one of the big problems under Michael Carrick that we saw for Borough was that they were often quite slow in working the ball forward. They were getting into the final third and, maybe pass it one or too many times. And teams are allowed to get back into shape far too easily, get men behind the ball. And then the space was lacking for Borough and the struggle to break teams down as a result. That happened far too often under Michael Carrick. Whereas while Rob Edwards has ultimately played many variations of tactics from Forest Green to Luton, I think he does tend to like his sides to get the ball forward quicker. Now, that doesn't have to mean that it's lumped long. He had the players that could do that at Luton. But you can do that in a more controlled manner. You can get the ball up to the midfield quickly. The midfield can go out wide to the wing backs and etc. You can move the ball quickly up the pitch without going long and without it being aimless as such. So, it wouldn't surprise me if we kind of see that kind of that system, potentially not too indifferent to the way Chris Wilder's Middlesbrough team set up with the very attacking wing backs and then obviously getting men in the box in that way. It might not be too dissimilar to that, but I think ultimately that's something that will have to be decided over the course of the summer, and it'll be something that I think we learn more about as the pre-season friendlies come.
Definitely, and I think one thing that's going to be really interesting as the matches start to get underway with pre-season, but also once the new season starts, is just how fans are going to react to him. Because if you're using social media as a barometer, which is always a little bit dangerous, you would think that appointing Rob Edwards was the worst decision that could possibly be made. Now, that's not a stance that I take. I think, like, as you've said, I think there's a lot of real positives. I think he could be a really good fit, and I think the fact that Luton got relegated from the Premier League and then what happened last season, I think there's fairly strong mitigation in his defence for why things didn't go right. And so from my point of view, I think he could be a really good appointment. But fans will need to be convinced if they are sceptical at this point. So how big a challenge do you think Rob Edwards faces to get fans on side in the early part of the season?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge, because I think what we saw towards the end of Michael Carrick's reign was, a lot of the fan base kind of became and felt quite disconnected and, quite disgruntled really about the way things were going. And so from what I'm led to believe, Rob Edwards is quite an effective communicator. Luton fans seem to really like him, and not just because obviously when he initially arrived, results went really well and he got them promoted, but, because of how he communicates and the fact that he is very appreciative. I've read and listened to a few interviews he's done now in which he speaks a lot about wanting to entertain fans and things like that, and the importance of supporters. So he seems to get that, and I think that'll, Middlesbrough fans will appreciate that. I think there was an issue there with Michael Carrick where he wasn't the most effective communicator at times, and in certain aspects like injuries where he was very guarded and very. There was a lack of openness, shall we say. I don't think that often helps supporters feel that connection with the club. So that was definitely an issue, which I think Rob Edwards will hopefully recognise and solve. But ultimately, I think all supporters want to win games, don't they? And ideally doing so in an attractive manner. And I think, nobody really cared that much about Michael Carrick's lack of communication skills when he initially came in and Boro went on that fantastic run to get to the playoffs. That wasn't an issue then. It became an issue when they weren't winning as many games. So ultimately, I think, there's a pressure there from Rob Edwards. He'll want to make a fast start, and he probably needs to make a fast start because, as you see, he's not the exciting appointment many clubs are these days, and Sunderland having success with it last season probably only emphasises the fact that it is quite attractive now to go to Europe and pick up a bit of an unknown quantity or a continental name, which, that's even in signing players, that's always more exciting than getting an Englishman. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. But ultimately, if Rob Edwards comes in, gets some good results, then I think he'll quickly turn fans. But what I would say is, I think the vast majority, I would like to think, the vast majority will initially, even if skeptical, get behind him. And if they are skeptical, if they are disappointed or not excited by the appointment, there could be the type where if it was a bad start, they'd turn quite quickly. But I think initially they'll be behind him. And if Rob Edwards can make a decent start, can say the right things and start to turn the mood a bit, then I don't think it will take much for supporters to want to him.
Definitely, yeah. It's going to be a really interesting time for him, and obviously now that he's been appointed, you mentioned earlier on that the players will be coming back for pre-season in just over a week's time. You've then got the pre-season schedule with friendlies before the big kickoff in August. So, what are the first few weeks of Rob Edwards' tenure going to look like, Craig? And what do you think of the sort of big, the big challenges, the big tasks that he faces in those couple of weeks? What are the main things that he's going to be getting stuck into once he's fully on board and in place?
Yeah, so I think he'll be keen to kind of, introduce himself to everybody and kind of quickly settle into his new environment. Obviously, it's not just playing staff, but there'll be all sorts. There'll be academy staff. There'll be general staff around Rockcliffe and the Riverside who I'm sure he'll want to kind of, introduce himself to and just get that feeling of being there, I guess, and being settled within his environment. I was reading back on his time at Forest Green. He that was the last time he went into a job. Well, no, I guess Watford he did, didn't he? But I was reading from Forest Green where he'd gone in at the start of the summer for a pre-season, and before the players had come back, he contacted all of them privately and had conversations. From what I've read, he's a really effective kind of one-to-one manager and handles individuals really well and things like that. And empathy is something that I've heard, and being an empathetic person is something I've heard about him a lot when I've been reading about him. So yeah, you'd imagine he'll potentially want to do that, and other players are expected back at Rockcliffe, I think, towards the back end of next week. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's having initial kind of phone or video conversations like that with the players before the return, and giving them an idea of what he'll expect of them and what Boro might be looking to do going forward. There's definitely plans for him to meet the recruitment team and kind of go over plans. We know that the recruitment team had already done a lot of planning heading into this summer transfer window, and understandably there's been a reluctance to kind of push forward with any deals while no head coach was in position. But having said that, at this stage of the transfer window, there aren't many deals happening anyway, because a lot of players are still on holiday and things like that. So again, there wasn't a real major need to rush on that. They could progress deals as far as they could, but they weren't going anywhere. So there's plans to meet with Rob Edwards and kind of get his thoughts on plans that were already in place, targets that have already been identified, and also speak to him about where he thinks the squad might be weak and might need a couple of replacements or a couple of strengthening, a couple of additions to strengthen. That'll be obviously a key factor as well. And then once the players do come back, it'll be a case of quickly trying to get his ideas across, quickly trying to win them over, and then using all that time on the training pitches that he'll ultimately have to start implementing these ideas. But also, I think it's an opportunity. It's a clean slate for every player ultimately, but he will ultimately be assessing every single one of them, and can they fit into how I want to play? Can they do it? Are they good enough? Are they not? And if they're not, do we need to replace them? And so I think I would imagine as the summer goes on, Boro's kind of transfer strategy and transfer priorities will change as and when Rob Edwards identifies new things. So yeah, it's a very interesting summer ahead for him leading into the new season, because there'll be I would imagine a lot to learn and a lot to get across.
Definitely, and I think there's going to be a lot to learn for all supporters who are going to be really, really interested to see what things will look like under Rob Edwards. I think there'll be a lot of attention paid to pre-season, and then obviously as the big kickoff rolls around in August. So Craig will be across absolutely everything with Teesside Live from pre-season to the start of the campaign. So Craig, where can fans keep up to date with your work and what's going on at the Riverside?
Yeah, so of course, obviously, every article will be on the Teesside Live website, the Gazette newspaper, and if you need direct into them, then you can find us on social media. On X, Craig_Johns, and then of course there's that Gazette Borough as well. We're over on Blue Sky, Facebook, and then the big one. I'd encourage everyone to get involved in the WhatsApp community. We don't spam your phone with absolutely everything we put out, but the big stories, when Rob Edwards was announced, that goes into the WhatsApp community, and it just means you get it on your phone, essentially like a text message. It comes through on your phone notification, and we'll be sending them out as and when big news stories, transfers, things like that over the summer happen, as we did with the Rob Edwards one when that was announced. So ultimately with the WhatsApp community, you never miss any big story coming out of Borough, because it's sent straight to your phone. So if you're on any article on the Teesside Live website, at the bottom of the article there'll be a little prompt at the bottom which tells you how to sign up and things like that. So I definitely encourage everybody to go and check that out.
Definitely, and I'm already subscribed to that, and it's like you said, it's a really handy service, getting the biggest news straight to your phone. So I definitely recommend that you all are subscribed to that. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do hit like and hit subscribe as well. Thank you very much, Craig, for joining me once again. It's been a busy couple of weeks with all the Michael Carrick stuff, but you've been very, very selfless in coming on the channel and divulging what you know about it. So thank you very much for all of your help, and I will catch up with you all next time.